Very happy to have Mike Bromwich back with me, ex-National Parks warden, Wanky warden. And Mike's got so much to tell us. I never quite know where to start. But for today, what we want to talk about is three of the outstanding chaps who served with the department, all of whom lost their lives basically in the line of duty. As we all know, this is not a profession for sissies, and these were tough guys who gave their all, and their story is one of courage and commitment. And so, Mike, I think this little chat this afternoon should really be a tribute to Willie de Beer, Robin Hughes, and Tim Wellington. Mike, you knew Willie de Beer well. Just tell us a little bit about Willie the man, and then we can work through some of the interesting events in his life.
Good afternoon to you, Hannes. Willem, yes, I really got to know him in Harare when he was warden roving control. But our paths did cross from time to time, and he was a remarkable man. He was born in, let me just check the date, get it, 1925 in South Africa, and his parents, emigrated up to Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and he was schooled in Tuli, senior school at Tuli Boys High. He made a lot of friends with the neighboring farmers, particularly the Bezuidenhout family, where he learned, a lot of his bushcraft and his love for the veld out in the Sabi area. Did a lot of hunting, a lot of horse riding. I'm just trying to put my mind around some of the facts, early facts about him. In 1944, he was called up after school, and he was selected on an officer cadet course, and there were 9 others, amongst whom was Peter Walls, who later was to become the general of the Supremo, El Supremo of the Rhodesian Army. They went across to Britain, where he was going to do his officer cadet training. When they got there, the European or the armistice had been signed, or the war had been finished, and Willie stayed on for a while. The colonial troops were requested to sign on for a further 6 years. Willie declined and then came back to Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. In 1946, he joined the Southern Rhodesia's Army, the Staff Corps, and spent 20 years in the Army, rising to the rank of captain. He was the RSM, and Willie is a huge man, a big man, and he was actually feared. I think a lot of the chaps who are watching this, who did the cadet camps at Nkoma, will remember Willem. And he definitely was feared. But as we got to know Willem, you realize that his bark was far worse than his bite. He was actually a very, very gentle man. But let me just go back to when he joined the department. He did 20 years of service in the Army. He left in 1965 and then applied to join the department. Like a lot of us, there was a waiting period, and Willem must have put his application in much the same time as I did. Robin Hughes, Dave Scammell, and we all joined the department much about the same time. I think Willem was a couple of months, maybe 6 weeks after I joined with Robin Hughes and Dave Scammell, John Osborne. John White came across from the admin block, but Willem joined, and the man, far senior to us in years. He was 40 years old when he joined the department, but he'd had a lot of experience in the bush, and he was posted to what was then the newly formed Wanky culling unit under Len Harvey. The other rangers that were there was, as far as it was only one other ranger, Ronnie de Beer, Ronnie van Heerden, and their task was to reduce the elephant population in Wanky and the buffalo populations. They were to reduce them to the figures. I think there was 1,000 elephant to be taken off, and or maybe not as, I'm just trying to get the fact on. Anyway, there were a number of elephants to be taken off and quite a substantial number of buffalo. But apart from that job, I don't think any of us really enjoyed that sort of culling operations. Nobody did. Bilham's field work varied. He was involved in control work in the Gwai area, line control there. That seemed to be an endless problem, and also in the Chilocho area. And I think, you know, when we have to look at Billy, I don't know whether he had a love-hate relationship with lion, but paths always seemed to cross with lion wherever he went. And his first incident with lions was, I think, in 1968, when he was asked to go down into the Chilocho area to deal with problem or stock killing lions in the Chilocho area near Koridziba. Well, he went down there and he took with him his young son, who was about 7 years old, and his trackers went down there, and they patrolled the area fairly extensively. They found 2 lions that had been dealt with by the locals. They'd been trapped and shot. And Billy actually met up with the chap who had the firearm, and he had a look at it, and was an old muzzle loader. And, you know, Willem, being very sensitive to the old people, just said to the chap, listen, you know, you shouldn't have it. I suggest you pension the rifle, that your muzzle loader off, which the chap did do. But Willem carried on with his patrol, and they found another bunch of lions that had killed some stock. They went after them. They shot one, and he wounded a lioness. And he followed this lioness in the thick bush. It got hold of Billy and started to maul him badly. And when I say maul him badly, I mean extremely badly. He ended up by putting his hand into its mouth. It was biting him on the shoulder, on the arm, and the thigh, and he ended up by putting his hand into the mouth of the lion, screaming for his tracker to shoot the lion, which he did. He discharged his Willem's double 470, double discharge, and which put the tracker on the back, the rifle on the ground, but it managed to kill the lion. He was obviously very, very scared that, you know, he would lose his hand his arm with the shot, because the game scout put the rifle to the head of the lioness. But that didn't happen, and Willem sort of, you know, extracted himself from the lioness. His hand was exceptionally badly damaged, and his arm, he was bleeding profusely. Anyway, just to cut quite a long story short, Willem, being the person he was, sort of tidied himself up a bit, made a plan to get the lion back, and he set off back to his vehicle, limping badly. I mean, the injuries to his thigh were bad. His arm was a mess. And he got back to the vehicle where his son was, who was 7 years old. He made sure that, typical Willem, looking after everybody else at his own expense, or didn't worry about himself. He made sure that his son had some lunch. The game scouts were catered for. They tidied up their camp, and they then set off to Pumula, where there was a clinic and a doctor was in attendance. That was a fairly long drive. And Willem shared the driving with his son. Now, you can imagine a 7-year-old boy. Willem battled, trying to put his foot in the clutch. His left leg was damaged badly. And they shared the steering. He said in his notes, and it's a story that that was given to me by his daughter, very kindly. They shared the driving to Pumula. They got there, the doctor wasn't there. So the sister attended to him. She was actually horrified at his injuries. Anyway, they patched him up. She gave him some morphine and I think it was a tetanus injection or penicillin, and to relieve the pain. Middle of the night, Willem didn't really sleep at all. His game scouts were camping outside, and so was young Willem, his son. And early in the morning, Willem got up and said, "We're packing up. We're going back to Wankie, to main camp." Well, as they were about to leave, the doctor pitched up, stopped Willem, and they had a quick look at him, and they examinations and realized that Willem had to go and get proper medical treatment. They couldn't do that at the Pumula clinic. So Willem set off back to main camp. The drive must have been horrific. Look, it must have taken him 7-8 hours to get back. He got back in time to be put onto the Harare flight, or Salisbury flight, which must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He was seen off by Bruce Austin, his provincial warden. Bruce's remarks to the air hostess was, please look after this man. He's very important to us. He's precious, not only to us, but also as lion bait. I mean, Bruce had a bit of a warped sense of humor. We need him for all sorts of things, one of which may be lion bait. Anyway, Willem went off to Aurora. He was picked up by a doctor and admitted into the Salisbury Hospital. He was there for just over 2 weeks, I think. And he had a fractured hand, fractured arm, and very badly bitten around. He returned, I think, 2.5, 3 weeks later to Sharpie, where they were based, and he carried on his duties. Now, we go from there to the Sharpie tragedy. Now, this has been reported very, very widely. I have read the Willem's account, I've read Hazel's account, and I've read Colin Matthews' account. Colin was Hazel's son and Willem's stepson from his second marriage. It was Easter 1972 that incident took place. But to go back in time a little bit, which we need to look at, the Sharpie camp was a culling camp. It was open. There were pens. There was a processing factory run by Paul Grobler, and lions used to wander in and out of the camp on the odd occasion. A short while before the incident, a lioness or a lion, Willem didn't actually know it was a lioness at the time, but a lion had behaved somewhat peculiarly, and which sort of made Willem think that there might have been something wrong. They did track it on one occasion when it left the camp, but after an hour or so's walking, they realized, look, we haven't got authority to do anything about it, and it's a pointless exercise following up and possibly provoking an incident and having to destroy the lion. So they returned back, and Willem reported to Len Harvey that there was a problem, that he feared there was a problem with a lion, that there was a lion a emaciated lion possibly, or a lion that had been injured, and she was sort of hanging around the camp, and he was a little bit concerned about it, and he asked whether they could shoot an animal, and it was wildebeest, and then try and entice and move the animal away. He wasn't given permission from Len. Anyway, a few days later, one of the game scouts reported that a lion had tried to get into his hut. It had raided his chicken coop and killed all the chickens and tried to get into his hut. Well, that really put the wind up Willem, and he went and investigated. He spoke to all the scouts and the laborers in the camp, in the Sharpie camp. And then they went and had a look around the camp itself and found that the lion had gone into a deserted house. It was actually Ranger Dendy's house. Now, Ranger Dendy wasn't there at the time. He was away on days off, which is very fortunate. The lion had walked into his hut, walked over, and Willem reports that the house, it was dark, it was thatched. He said it absolutely reeked of lion. He could see the marks where it had been scratching the walls, it had urinated, and all over the show. And he said absolutely reeked of lion. He went out and looked around, and they found where the lion had actually gone to sleep outside Len Harvey's house, underneath one of the windows of the house. Now, just to put everybody in, put this in perspective, those houses didn't have windows. They didn't have doors. There were open spaces for both. So there was a gap. Poland dugger huts, there was a gap for a window and a gap for a door. Willem again spoke to Len, and Len said, look, we can't touch it. He'd obviously, and according to Willem, had his knuckles wrapped once before for dealing with a lion. And so he was reluctant to do anything about it. Anyway, that is the picture as it stood prior to Easter 1972. That long weekend, Hazel's son, accompanied by 3 of his friends, came up from South Africa to celebrate his passing of a university degree and some spend time with his mother and with Willem. They went off to the falls. They came back. They had a chat that evening, and everybody went to bed. The generator was switched off, and everybody went to bed. It must have been close to midnight. Willem was woken up by sound of running feet and hysterical screams, and it was Jean Harvey, Len's wife. Now, they'd been married for 10 days. This is a tragedy. Willem put a torch on and immediately switched it off again. She was covered in blood. She'd been savaged by this lion, and she screamed and cried out, the lion is killing and eating Len. It must have been a horrific sight. Hazel came through. She heard the commotion, and she ushered and took the Jean away. Colin heard the commotion as well and came through, and Willem said, look, we've got serious trouble. We've got to get across and help help Len and just see what he can do for him. And one must remember that, the camp was in darkness. They had to get the generator started. Their first place to call was the office. They went across the office where the firearms were, and they took out 2 firearms, one of which happened to be a very light caliber rifle, a 243, which Willem handed to Colin, and he fossicked around in the dark and picked up another rifle, which turned out to be a 375, got some ammunition, and then they went to start the lighting plant, which they managed to get started, and that lit up the office and provided lights for the houses, but there were no other sort of lights around. And they cautiously made their way across to Len's house. Now, there's a photograph of Len's house, which I've sent to you, and you can just see it. Willem got there and he sort of tried to peer into the house, which was lit. He couldn't see anything. He sort of raised himself up the one window and looked in the open gap, looked in a little bit further, couldn't see anything. And then he stumbled, put his head through and his shoulders through, not knowing that this lioness was actually lying directly below him. Below the window. It was lying and watching him. When he stuck his sort of his torso through to have a better look, this lion just grabbed him on the face and clawed him. And in the melee, they fell out backwards out of the hut. And the lioness just proceeded to really chew and bite Willem. It must have been absolutely terrifying. At pitch black, the lion initially scalped Willem. He said his right eye came out of his socket. He couldn't see, and he was blinded. And I don't know quite how long the savaging carried on for. But in the end, the lion started to lick Willem's face. He was in excessive pain. The next minute, there was a scream, a blood-curdling scream, and it was Colin. The lion had turned from Willem. Obviously, Colin had moved or done something. She'd seen Colin, and the lion turned onto Colin and started mauling Colin. At that stage, the lion was still half lying on Willem's legs, and Willem sat up. He couldn't see. Started to put his hands out. He found the stock of a rifle and managed to extract the rifle, cock it, fired 3 shots, one after the other, into this lioness. Everything went still, and Willem said to Colin, Colin, are you all right? And Colin's reply was, I'm all right, but I think you've shot off my right hand, shot off my hand. Willem managed to sort of get the lioness off them, and between the two, Colin leading Willem, because he couldn't see, they made their way back to the house, to Willem's house. Now imagine the state of Hazel when she saw them both. But Willem being just an absolute stalwart. I mean, I cannot even imagine. And I mean, I close my eyes when I think about this. When I think that his concern wasn't for himself, it was for the station, it was for Colin, it was for Len, it was for Jean. And he did the right thing. He gave Hazel detailed instructions of what had to be done, that the senior scout had to be woken up, had to go through to main camp, to alert the authorities, to get a helicopter flown in from Wanky. And this was typical Willem. He was, tidying up everything, getting it all organized was his priority. And as I say, this was Willem's priority. Well, they patched him up a little bit. He lay down on the bed, and Hazel went off to main camp, drove through the main camp with one of the game scouts, Derek Williams, and one other. I'm trying to think who the other ranger was. Came back. They got back to Sharpie pretty quickly, and at 4:00 a helicopter arrived from Wanky. And it was pitch black. It was raining, and the helicopter touched down. They put on Jean, Colin, and Willem, and off they went to hospital, where there was Dr. Hay, who attended to Willem. He was there in hospital, I'm just trying to think, initially for 6 weeks. He had 162 stitches put into his head, his face. his eye was put back again. He required another 4 operations to his eye, which those operations were done in Salisbury or Harare. And there were 2 staples, metal staples, put into his forehead to secure it. Willem, true to everything we've just said already, was more concerned about Colin. Colin was in the same ward. They chatted, and as I said, he was very concerned about him. They were flown later to Harare, to Salisbury, and he went into the Andrew Fleming Hospital, where he had these other eye operations, and was finally discharged. I think it was in September, which would have made it about 2-3 months after the operation, the end of September, that he was actually declared fit for duty, and then reposted. He was reposted to Tuli, and we'll go into that in a moment. Sharpie,
Mike, Len Harvey, did he have a weapon? Did he manage to put up any resistance, or did the lion get him in his bed?
The lion initially attacked Jean, and Len went to rescue. It actually jumped through the window onto Jean, and Len went to her rescue. They didn't have any weapons in the houses. That was for security reasons. They were all locked in safes, in the gun safes in the office. So nobody had any weapons. And in some of his notes and his autobiography, which he wrote up, he said, Willem said I kept a handful of rocks close to my bed, which I used to toss out the window at the door when lions used to come a bit too close. So, I mean, that's all they had. So they had no weapons at all. So Len was actually sort of mauled and partially devoured, which is actually very, very sad. He was buried in Bulawayo in an unmarked grave, and Paul Kutsia, myself, and Richard Elwood went to look for his grave. We believe we found it, but it's an unmarked grave, basically. But if we go now to Tuli, Willem took over from Johnny Bunce, and was in the safari area for a couple of years. And true to form, it was then called, it was Tuli CHA, Tuli Controlled Hunting Area. It only became declared a safari area in 1975 when the new act was promulgated. And once again, Willem's concern, Willem was sort of active in game management. They did a lot of cropping there. They had to do cropping. And he was in charge of the controlled hunting area, where there was regular clients coming in and hunting. Well, more Rhodesians hunting at those days than anybody else. There was a fair amount of poaching in the communal areas and in the Tuli area itself. And I'm not sure which date it was, but Willem sent out a patrol of 6 scouts into the circle and onto the Sharpie River to check for poaching. Two of the scouts, they split up from the other 4, and they went into some thick area bordering the communal area, and they found a lioness in a snare. They found one dead and a lioness in a snare. She was still alive. They tried to look at her, and she sprung at them, and they believed that she'd actually been shot. But because he fell backwards, they didn't know what the story was. Anyway, they didn't wait around to look, and they took off, and they ran into another pride of lions that were exceptionally aggressive, causing them to drop their packs. They kept their rifles, and they took off, and they went back they made their way back to Tuli and report to Willem that there was a lion in a snare, and then there was another dead one. So Willem got some more scouts, and they set off back to have a look at this. They came to the scene where this lion was, and this lioness was, and she too she growled, and she sprang at Willem, only to be sort of pulled back by the snare, which Willem discovered that was actually around her neck and around her shoulders. And Willem sort of backed up a little bit warily, and true to character, his immediate thought was, how do I get this lion out? I don't want to kill it. How do I get this lioness out of the snare? He had a 30-06 with him, 5 rounds of ammunition. So I think it's just, it's just typical of him. So he moved the scout into a secure position. Fairly, he moved her away. So let the lion concentrate on the scout that moved away, and he tried to crawl a little bit closer. Didn't take his eyes. The lioness didn't take her eyes off him. Sprang at him a couple of times. Only to be pulled back. And Willem sat down. I'm not sure what the distance was, but it would have been closer than 20 meters. And Willem had a look through his telescopic sights, saw the cable, the wire that was holding the line, and thought, right, I will break the wire with a shot and free the line, and she'll take off, the lioness. His first shot, he missed, which astounded Willem, and he was an exceptional shot. Second shot he missed. He didn't miss the third shot, and with which the lioness was freed, and she didn't turn away from Willem. She came in a full-blooded charge to Willem. Well, he had no option but to shoot her at very, very close quarters. His first bullet struck her in the chest and put her down, or caused her to hesitate, and his second bullet put her down. Now he was out of ammunition. His 5 rounds had gone, and he hurriedly sent the scout back to the vehicle to get his 470 and to bring some more ammunition. Well, the lioness did die, and he had a look at it. And what they found, that she'd been snared, they found 2 other lions there. So the locals, which is something to think about, which we need to actually put a brief mention here, is about problem animal control, that the locals had taken steps to sort their own problems out, maybe out of revenge, or because I really don't doubt that Willem didn't answer calls, promptly. But this is one of the tragedies, that if problem animals are not dealt with, speedily and promptly, that the community takes steps to deal with the problems themselves. Exactly the same happened in Chilocho, where they killed 2 lions using gin traps and spears and muzzleloader. And the same had happened here in Tuli, but this was actually in the circle. But the lions had been skinned and mutilated, and various parts taken, obviously, for witchcraft. Willem took the skins back and the carcasses back. So that just gives you an idea of the character of Willem. Puts aside his safety completely, more concerned with the well-being of the lion, did his utmost to try and extract that lion, at his own peril from the snare.
Mike, while he was in the Tuli area, he also he got an award for saving a game scout. I think he was drowning in the Sharpie River.
Yes. He was actually given an award. I'm just trying to just think what he was given.
It was an MLM.
Let's have a look.
Member of the Legion of Merit.
Yeah, Legion of Merit. That was for the Len Harvey incident, but he was cited in a newspaper article written by Ted Machel, and again for bravery. The Sharpie River came down in flood, and that is an absolutely huge river. The people that know it or don't know it, it's probably 0.5 kilometer wide, and it comes down in raging torrents. The game scout was washed away. Willem was told, and at night took a boat onto the river at his own peril. The spotlight searched the river and eventually found the game scout on a submerged tree, wedged in the fork of a tree. Willem, we don't know what would have happened, whether the game scout would have been able to hold on through the night. We just don't know. But Willem managed to rescue the game scout. They got back to the camp safely. But so there again, there's the same thing. Incredible bravery he didn't worry about himself. His concern was his colleagues, his staff, and friends. And Willem would walk to the ends of the earth, barefoot, in pain, whatever it was. That was Willem. And as I say, he demonstrated this time and time again. There is that article. I have sent you a photograph of it, which you'd like to display. He got the MLM for bravery, for rescuing Len, or trying to go to assist Len at his own peril. Willem, after Tuli, was posted to Teresa Safari area as the ranger in charge. He was there for a couple of years. He had also a very, very sad incident there where he lost a game scout to an elephant, an enraged elephant cow, which they never found out why. She charged the vehicle, hit the vehicle from the back. Unfortunately, the game scout panicked and jumped out, and the elephant killed Nyson, the game scout, right in front of Willem's eyes, and absolutely massively broken.
Mike, let's just move on a bit. We're into the mid-70s. The war's escalating. National parks gets drawn more and more into the conflict, and particularly on the tracking side. And that brought about the formation of the Tracker Combat Unit, which was to a large extent national parks guys, rangers and scouts, black and white, really came to prominence as the war escalated.
Hannes, that is correct. At the start of Operation Hurricane, right at the beginning, tracker teams were deployed. They consisted those days of one ranger and two game scouts. Paul Coetzee was contacted actually and requested to supply trackers, and Oliver Coltman and one or two other chaps from the valley were the initial teams that went in with two trackers and started the tracking. And then Paul, they basically, what they were doing is with 2 weeks, a stint of 2 weeks in, and then out, and the next tracker team would come in. It was very, very loosely arranged. Paul was very, very competent, and he called for volunteers to do that, to do the tracking units. So Oliver Colton went in. I can't remember the second or the third. I was about the third or the fourth volunteer to go in, and we went to Centenary and then up to Mount Darwin. Well, as the hostilities progressed, the teams changed from one ranger and two scouts to a team of 4, 2 rangers and 2 scouts. It was deemed to be more efficient, and company for support for the rangers and the staff to have 2 officers with them, which they did. The scouts were very reliant on their field staff. They didn't want to track with security forces. They'd had experience earlier on in the earlier operations, tracking for security forces, and they were very, very willing to track with the officers that they knew and who they'd worked with. And so this was the reason for the combat teams. In 1973, the war was escalating. Operation Hurricane. They were not getting the kills that they wanted to, and there was a call for more teams to go in. And I remember getting a call from head office from Dr. Child that I should go to Centenary, report to brigade headquarters there, and to get there as soon as possible. Well, I didn't know, and I sort of phoned and said, well, do you want shall I bring my trackers? And they said, well, you can bring your trackers with you, but we need to see you up here. Anyway, I went up there, met Brigadier Hickman, Captain Mike Graham, Dumpy Pierce, who was also a captain, and Neil Creel, who was also a captain. They were all in the jock. Anyway, they talked to me about Andre Rabi. They said, you obviously knew that Andre Rabi had been killed, and they talked to me about pseudo operations and asked whether I was willing to do a couple of specific tasks for them, which involved the security around Centenary. They said, listen, we'll give you you don't have to give us an answer this evening, but you can tell us in the morning. But I thought about this. I firmly believe that at the time, which I still do now, that the only way to fight, the insurgency war is to get onto the same level where they are, and for the fight on the same terms as they do. So I agreed to do that, and so we went from there. I drew kit the next day, and was taken out by Land Rover and handed over to Stretch Franklin and his ex-SAS and his team of pseudo operations, which was believe me, it was an experience. I was there with them for 2 or 3 days and came back again. And I realized then, you realize actually how unfit you were in comparison to these chaps that are covering 20, 30 kilometers across the countryside every day, A lot of it they were walking bare feet. And suddenly realized actually how unfit you were, because I was not used to carrying a pack for any length of period and stuff like that. Anyway, when we got back, I learned that Robin Hughes was coming across as well. And that Robin was coming across from national parks for a 2-year contract. He'd signed on to the army, or been seconded to the army for a 2-year contract. Now, just to go back a little bit in time with Robin Hughes, he'd resigned from the department in 1969, I think it was, or 69, 68, 69. Anyway, he resigned and he'd formed a safari company with Jeff Sutcliffe, Kariba, and Robin, took tours around and conducted. Guy was doing a professional guiding job in the Monopools area in the valley and doing wildlife forms. But he rejoined the department mid-73 and was posted to Urungi, also in the valley in a controlled hunting area. And so he'd been there for 3 months, and he'd obviously been approached as well. And he was a fluent linguist, Shona linguist. And Robin volunteered to come across. He held the rank of lieutenant, the Tracker Combat Unit, Alan Savory's Tracker Combat Unit that Alan Savory formed, and Robin came there. When I met up with Robin when he came there. It was great to see him. It really was. I mean, Robin and I joined the department at the same date, in July, I think it was 1966. And although we were posted in different parts of the country, our paths used to cross from time to time. We always used to get together, chat, and reminisce. And I went once or twice with Robert, but it was good to have him there. And we did some retraining with Stretch Franklin in the Horseshoe area. We followed we got to learn the pseudo tactics of the passwords and procedures and stuff like that. And it was actually an amazing experience. Now, the Horseshoe Block was in the Sipalilo area. We were camped under these beautiful raffia rufia palms. And the one evening, I'm just trying to think who it was. I don't know whether it was Pete Stanton. I think it might well have been Pete Stanton from Special Branch, brought out a recent capture. And he'd been manacled, had leg irons on. And he just said, I'll be bringing him out and leave him with you. And you can learn from him what's been happening. Well, we sat around that fire in the evening, and Stretch Franklin, being the senior NCA, he was a sergeant with SAS, chatted to the Stretch, and we learned a tremendous amount from him, just listening to him talk. Anyway, when it was all over, it was time to doss down. We all sort of lay down on our ground sheets. And I remember saying to Robin, it's incredibly strange. We've got tame terrorists here, MRM, not wasn't MRM, Frelimo soldiers, excellent Frelimo soldiers, and we've got RAR with us. And it's complete trust, absolutely complete trust. The next day, Stretch took the handcuffs off this chap, and we chatted to him again. Robin and I used to do the radio skids, which was about a 5K walk up the mountains. We got radio schedules with the jock, and came back again and carried on retraining. We were building up our fitnesses. And then after I think it was about 4 or 5 days, we returned to Centenary, and Robin and I were given a team to work with. There was Martin, I can't remember Martin's surname. He was decorated and got the Silver Cross. There were some remarkable soldiers. We had a couple of tame terrorists with us, and ex-Frelimo, and a couple of RAR. We were deployed into the Cheweshi area in Centenary. We were deployed at night by Special Branch Land Rover, and this was actually a hair-raising experience. We went out in 2 Land Rovers, Special Branch chaps deploying us. And you must remember in those days that there were police roadblocks, and they stopped. There was a curfew, and everybody was stopped. And Special Branch had put word out that they were deploying people, or whatever it was at night. They were to be given free access through the police roadblocks, these police reserve roadblocks. When we stopped in there, you'll say it is terrifying, because these are open Land Rovers with the canvas canopy at the back, and in the back were half a dozen, 4 or 5 heavily armed pseudos, black troops, all armed with RPDs, AKs, and such like. Now, you can imagine if somebody inquisitive stuck his head in there and managed to see this, what would have been the result. Anyway, nothing untoward really happened. I must admit, I didn't like the drives out. I was far happier to get on the ground, and I suppose Robin and I were. Anyway, we deployed into the tertiary area. We walked in and set ourselves up for that night. The next morning, we found a suitable base place up a copy, and we sent out the chaps to start picking up intelligence. Now, in those days, the pseudo groups weren't so much intelligent groups seeking to call in fire force. They were killer groups. The object was to make contact and to kill. The Martin and the others were Meru, and the other chaps were made very, very welcome in the area surrounding, and we began to understand that the area was heavily subverted. The second day, I think it was, second night, we had chaps come up, trying to come up the copy to where we were, and Robin and I sort of, hid away, and the soldiers kept visitors directly away from where we were.
They're all dressed as insurgents.
Oh yes, insurgent gear. We had rice fleck camouflage on, and sorted clothing that they had recovered. I think that we had two RPDs in the section, and the rest the rest of us were armed with AKs. Anyway, to cut quite a long story short, our meeting was arranged, and we sent a sit rep back to Centenary, where the brigade was. That we were arranging a meeting for that evening. We packed up our camp and put our packs on and took off just as it was getting dark. We must have walked for 2 or 3 Ks at least, I suppose, maybe even longer. And we sat down the crawl where we were going to make contact with these chaps. Was probably 500 meters away. We put our packs and had a quick discussion and agreed that Robin, myself, and Medu, an RPD gunner, would not go up, but we would not want to compromise the situation or see that we were Europeans, even though we were blackened up. You can still pick up the European features. That we would stay away from the crawl and find a suitable place to stay out of sight. We walked slowly to the crawl and came past a cattle crawl, which had a fence and a stone wall on the one side, and it was actually an ideal position to wait up on. So we positioned ourselves there, and Martin and the other 5 or 6 chaps went up to the crawl to wait for the insurgents or the terrorists to make contact. We knew the passwords, and we were sitting with our backs against the fence, and there was a concrete wall to our side. It was pitch black. There was myself, Medu, the RPD gunner, and then Robin to his right. We were sitting there with our rifles, sort of AKs at the ready. And I can't quite remember how the time sort of frame. It might have been half an hour, 3/4 of an hour later. 3 or 4, maybe more, chaps just walked around and came out literally 3 or 4 places in front of us. They just appeared from nowhere. They'd come through the same area that we'd come through and walked across our front. They obviously saw us and stopped. There was, who are you? And Medu gave the initial, for the forwards of the password, and they replied. Well, as they answered, we opened fire. And our instructions were, what we've been trained to do was to empty, our magazines completely, just to full automatic and hold the weapon low and clear the area out. Well, so there would have been, I don't know, maybe 2 AKs, 60 rounds, and a belt of RPD, which is another 50, 110 rounds flying around. There was an incredible amount of screaming and shouting. And, one is sort of temporarily blinded by the gun flashes and, the muzzle flashes and stuff like that. Meru caught my hand and said to me, come, we must move. There was a lot of crying and screaming from in front of us. We knew there were wounded terrorists in front of us, and that we needed to get out of the area. So we moved off, and I remember having, firing a couple more rounds over the bodies as we sort of have to cross them or ran past them. And we went off, making our way back to where we left our packs. I got separated from Meru and had to make my way back. I didn't know where Robin was. As we got to the bottom, we were fired at from the rear of where our packs were, but obviously a lot closer. There were two bursts of fairly substantial fire that came across us, and after the firing had stopped, Martin at the top there had a contact going up there. Anyway, the whole place went up in flames. The whole crawl complex went up in flames. So the whole place was just thatch huts burning everywhere. The whole sky was just lit up, and we knew we couldn't sort of stay too long. We were lit up even 500 meters away. The place was sort of lit up, like daylight around us. We sat there. We waited for a bit. The rest of the team came together. I got to the radio and sent a coded message through to Centenary that we'd had a contact, that we had put down a number of terrorists, that there were wounded people there, and I also said that Robin Hughes, who was Sunray, that he was missing. And at this stage, they did ask whether there was anything untoward, and I said no, not at this stage. We did get separated, but we have got a crash RV which we would use in an emergency. If any of us got separated, we knew where we had to go to. So we waited probably for half an hour after putting the radio call through. I really wanted to go back. There was something niggling me very, very badly, and I wanted to go back into the area to where the contact had been. And I spoke to the soldiers, and I just said, "Oh, I need to go back." And they said, "You can't go back in there. We don't know who's alive in there and whether they're wounded, and you're going to jeopardize the security of the patrol if you go back in again," which did actually make sense. Anyway, we set off and we got to the crash RV, which was probably a kilometre, maybe a mile away, and at a bridge on the road. And we sat down there quietly as we approached. We crawled up close, and I whistled, that little guinea fowl whistle. No reply from Robin, No reply. We waited, called again. And I knew he would answer if he was there. Nothing came. So he pulled back a bit, and I got onto the radio again and said, look, we were at the crash RV, and that Robin wasn't there. The jock then advised me that troops had been deployed into the area. They were sending out support troops, and that they would rendezvous with us at a school a couple of miles away. And I was to make my way there. So we looked at the map, carefully found out where the school was. And, it's difficult at night trying to orientate yourself. And you got the directions. I got the directions a little bit muddled up. But probably after about 5-10 minutes, you suddenly think, well, the moon's in a different area. We're walking in the wrong direction. We're walking in the opposite direction where we should have been. So we spun around and made our way towards the school. We drew closer. We could see the lights coming in. And then the lights stopped. And I got onto the radio there, and I made contact with the officer coming in. They were RAR troops. It was a Lieutenant Mayering who'd come out, and I just talked to him quietly. I just said, listen, please, just keep your troops right away. We're going to come in now. We're coming in single file, and please just keep your troops right away so there is no accidents. We came in. We were put onto an Oriole, as I remember, and we were sent straight out the area. And got back to our camp in Centenary and the farm we were staying at in the early hours of the morning. I washed, bathed, and then first light took one of our Land Rovers and then drove to Centenary and to find out what the story was. When I went into the ops tent, there was the brigadier was there, John Hickman and Neil Creel, Dr. Pierce, and Mick Graham. My first question was, what's happened to Robin? And Mick Graham was the one that broke the news to me. Robin didn't make it. He'd been shot through the head, and he hasn't made it back. Soul destroyed. But I just think of it now. A volunteer and first operation, and just tragedy. I had to go back and break the news to the soldiers, to our group, which I did. They were absolutely dumbstruck. They didn't believe that anything had gone wrong either. But that niggling feeling that I had after the contact, when he'd gone back to get to our packs, there was just something wrong somewhere, and I didn't know how to put my finger onto what it was, but it's just that horrible feeling that something has gone wrong.
Mike, he must have been hit in that opening exchange.
I don't know whether, it wasn't that opening exchange. I understood from, I think I'm correct in saying, and I think I've written this whole story up in the Men Speak for Jonathan Pittaway. I wrote this whole story up. And from what I learned subsequently, that Robin was shot near the fence, shot through the head through the fence. Now, I can't substantiate that. Where I never went into all those details. And it was actually a tragedy of note. Gretel, I understood afterwards, Gretel, Robin's wife, had asked Paul Coetzee not to allow him to go, to do this 2-year attachment to the regular army or to special branch. She may have had a premonition of as well. It was very, very sad. So to complete the story, we were deployed again the next night, the day after. So we had one day back at camp. And, this old adage that if you fall off a horse, you've got to get back onto it as soon as you possibly can. Otherwise, you lose your nerve. We were deployed again into another area, the same group. I was in charge of them, and we went into we spent, I think it was 3 nights trying to make contact with the groups, any groups in the area, which it didn't happen. And we were pulled out after 3 nights. And the chaps were very, very weary, but it was a good exercise. It was a good exercise. You understand the reasoning behind it, because it gives you confidence again that you're with a good team of men. And as we later had in the pseudo operations, those chaps would lay their lives down for you. And I witnessed it in a contact later on with Basil, when I was with Basil Moss, working with Basil Moss and an extended team. They went back to get a wounded, they went back under heavy fire to get one of the wounded soldiers out. It was actually an amazing thing to see. So it was a really good exercise. But going back to Robin, I came back to Rory to attend Robin's funeral, and I was requested to go to the CIO offices now. And I spent, I think, best part of 2 or 3 hours with Ken Flower, and we were talking through the pseudo concept, and he wanted to know whether I believed that we should continue with this mode of operations. And I told him, quite frankly, I said, I believe it is probably the only way to go and to get intelligence. So we had a long chat about it. We discussed various operations and the contact men and formations and bits and pieces. It was actually a very interesting discussion. He also asked me to go and to the Hughes family, to go and talk to the Hughes family. I had never met them. I had met Gretel. That was a tough experience. That they were very, very good to me, very gentle with me. But it must have been incredibly hard for them as well. Incredibly hard for them, to listen to the story. As I could tell them as much as I could tell them, which I was allowed to tell them. And Robin, we attended Robin's funeral. It was a military funeral. And I was saying goodbye to a very, very dear friend. And we become, 10 days, 2 weeks that we'd worked together, we become very, very firm friends. And it was actually, it was devastating.
Mike,
the chaps.
Let's move on to another great soldier and conservationist, basically, Tim Wellington, who was also, I think he was an SAS man. But very, very committed to his life as a game ranger. And he also left us too early. Just a little bit about Tim and what happened there.
Yeah, Tim was an ex-Michael House schoolboy. His father was an Anglican minister, Anglican padre. Tim came to the department from KwaZulu-Natal, where he was a game control officer. I met him when I was posted to Robbins. I was sent up from head office. I was promoted to ward. I was a warden at the time, warden roving control. I was then transferred to Robbins as warden Robbins, and Tim was the ranger trails. Now, trails had been moved up from Mabaluta. Donkey trails have been moved up from Mabaluta, where they were no longer, where they can no longer be undertaken because of the war situation down there. That was in '76. So Tim, all the pack equipment, the stuff like that was sent up to Robbins, and Tim was to be the trails officer there. Now, Tim was an outstanding ranger. He absolutely outstanding ranger. You could just see it from his stature. Whatever he did, he would do it to the best standard, the highest standard it was possible. He did one trail up there, and then was one of my rangers for a short period of time before he was, I think, called up to the SAS and not quite on permanent call up, but he was doing a lot of SAS call ups, and he volunteered shortly after coming to Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. He volunteered for active service or to do his army training. He was an immigrant, and there again, typical Tim, not satisfied to do national service. If I'm going to do it, I will go to the best unit I can do, and I will pass, which he did. He passed his selection course and became a member of C Squadron. Tim was later posted to Mana Pools as ranger in charge there, senior ranger. He was given the name Bonongwe by the Game Scouts. Bonongwe comes from the common name for the plant is pigweed. It's the rank weed. It's sort of pink red structure. It's fairly coarse and grows to fairly high. And Tim's nickname was Bonongwe. But so he was a dedicated officer. I've had the privilege to read some of his letters that he wrote to his fiancée at the time, was Jennifer Bay. They later married, and I have been in contact with her. She's remarried now. It's Jennifer Pelham, Jenny Pelham, and I do maintain contact with her. And his letters actually just tell of his absolute dedication. He loved his photography. It didn't matter what the creature was, whether it was a field mouse, or an elephant, whether it was a little prinia or a martial eagle, whether it was a weed or a giant baobab. Tim was interested in everything. Everything mattered to him. All things in creation mattered to him, I can put it that way. They had a role to play, and he was interested in everything and would study them. His greatest joy was being out on patrol, where he was probably at one with nature. Mana floodplain was properly flooded, and the water came right up to the edge of the fort, and then subsided. And we've got photographs of Tim wading through waters on the floodplain, back on his back, and incredibly happy. And he used to do these extended patrols, 10 days walking down to Chawari, patrolling Mana, checking on birds' nests, looking at every little thing, collecting plant specimens, spending as much time as he could. The camera, he was a very, very, very good photographer, and collecting pictures. After Mana, Tim was posted to Wankie Management Unit under Clem Coetzee. It was Clem called him Appy, maybe because Tim was just so keen to learn, that Tim nicknamed him Appy, and which is probably very, very sort of astute of Clem, because Tim just needed to learn, needed to grasp, needed to progress, and nothing was ever too much trouble for him to do, mechanical-wise, foot-wise, anything. I can't remember how long he was actually at main camp, at Mchibi. I think it was a Sunday or a Saturday or a Sunday that an elephant was wounded outside the park on a either concession or a hunting area. A very big bull, and it was wounded and it crossed into the park, and it was reported, and Tim and Clem were tasked to go out and deal with this wounded animal, followed up and put it down. And it was a very, very big, one of those very big wanky bulls. They set off, they picked up the tracks, they went back to the boundary, picked up the tracks and started to follow. And it's pertinent to mention that Clem had just had bilharzia treatment And I think it might have been that amble heart treatment, whatever it was. He wasn't 100%, but Clem knew there was a job to do, and they went off together. They caught up with the elephant, I think, mid-morning. It might have been 12 o'clock. I'm not quite sure, but mid-morning-ish was about right. And it was at a pan. Tim saw it and ran ahead. Clem lost sight of him. There was a shot and nothing else. When Clem got to the pan, Tim was down, and I'm not sure whether he passed away at that stage or whether he was still alive. But if he was alive at that stage, I don't know. Say, and he did. The elephant had fatally trampled him and killed him. Was it? I'm trying to just think of the.
Was the elephant? Was the elephant still alive?
The elephant had disappeared. Clem followed it up later, because it might have been that same afternoon, and put it down. Tim's bullet had. I'm trying to think whether it had gone 2 inches too high, inch and a half too high, or inch and a half, 2 inches too low, like for a frontal brain shot. Well, with a big wanky bull, that makes all the difference. It didn't even pause. It just ran over Tim, which is actually very, very sad, and killed him. That was 24th of October 1979 that Tim was killed. He was 26 years old, a senior ranger, and another tragic loss. Tim would have got a long way in our department. I do believe that at the time a relatively short space of time, he would have made it up to a rank of warden. He was a senior ranger, and he would have made a magnificent station head running, in the department. But that wasn't to be. And he hadn't been married very long, and absolute tragedy that. I couldn't get to his funeral, unfortunately. I was down at Mabaluta in the Ghana Resort at the time, and I couldn't get out to his funeral. But it was another tragic time for the department. He was the first person that we actually lost on active field duty. Several people had been injured by elephants. Some had been, like Willie de Beer, had been scratched, very badly mauled, not scratched, very badly mauled by lions. Paul Reed had been thrown around by, tossed and gored by a buffalo. Oliver Coltman had been damaged, gored by a buffalo. Dolph Sassine had a very, very nasty experience with an elephant. As had Andy Pugh, who was another one extremely lucky to get away with his life with an elephant. But tragically, Tom was the only one we lost on active field duty. But when you think of the work that we did with elephants, with wildlife, it speaks something to the training and the care that our seniors took in tutoring all our rangers and stuff like that. Speaks volumes for the caliber of men that they were. They were never thrown out in the deep end. Never thrown out in the deep end. They always would tutor you properly, and only when you were competent. They felt that you were competent to handle a situation would they allow you to go and deal with something. And as I say, speaks volumes for the chaps that were in charge. So Hannah said that was a Tim Wellington story, and I must just mention that Tim was also awarded a medal. He was. I'm just trying to pick up which medal he was. He was a member of the Legion of Merit, and he was awarded that at Government House. So yes, 3 good men.
Yeah.
Willie de Beer died. I just trying to work it out when it was. I'm just trying to think. And Willie died at Rua. Well, how can we put it? It was just a closing of a chapter. They all were closing chapters.
Mike, thanks for your time.
Yeah, okay. Hannes, well, thanks very much indeed. And there's a lot to talk about still, and we'll just see how we go.
But thanks for that, Mike. Very interesting.